Hello everyone, I'm the Weather Dude, welcome back, and today we're going to continue talking about what the winter could look like across the United States for the winter of 2023 into 2024. We're going to kind of just take a look at what the conditions could look like, and we're going to get some additional maps that could contribute to my next winter forecast, my official update number 2 that'll probably be released in the next week or two. We're going to take a look at some other factors today that could influence this winter season that I have not included in my first winter forecast video. So of course, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell notifications so you don't miss another upload, and we're just going to go ahead and get right into it here. So here we're going to be talking about in this video the possibility that some parts of the United States could actually be dealing with some major snowstorms this winter. All right, and believe it or not, El Nino, as you're seeing on your screen now, El Nino is a big driver of seasonal weather, whether that be, the summer or hurricane season or the winter and winter season. But El Nino is not the only thing that can control the weather pattern, especially during a season. We're going to take a look at what those other factors are during this video today, right? And there's several of them to lay out here. But just to do a little bit of recapping, and I also put my first winter forecast video at the end of this video, so in case you happen to not see it, it'll be there as well. But just a recap of the El Nino here, of our El Nino advisory that we have issued by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, right? And you can see that equatorial sea surface temperatures are above average. There's a consistent El Nino here, and it's going to have a greater than 95% chance, so almost certain, to continue through the winter of 2024. All right, if we look at the CFS, the anomalies here, so you can kind of see again, staying in that El Nino territory as late as potentially even next spring, so spring of 2024. So, which means during the winter months, which lay in here, we're going to be dealing with an El Nino similar strength to what we have now, at least according to these forecasts. They think somewhere around where we are now, maybe even trending a little bit downward. They seem the CFS seems to forecast a kind of a downward trend there in the El Nino. So what does a typical El Nino look like? Again, these are some things we took a look at in the first winter forecast video. You can see usually warmer conditions across the north, wetter and cooler conditions across the south, and in the middle, kind of like in that Midwestern area, it's usually kind of dry. However, like I stated earlier, there are wildcard factors that could influence the winter one way or another. All right, so again, if we highlight here, let's take a look at the precipitation during an El Nino at similar strength to what we have right now. Again, wet and cool across the south, dry across the Midwest, and even parts of the Northwest as well. And in terms of temperatures, a good chunk of the country has been seasonally or generally cooler. And I think, some of these factors that I show you in this video could explain why, because usually the north is warm, and that is true, at least in some of these, at least a couple counties across the north. There are whopping three counties. But I think there is a reason for this. All right. So if we take a look here at our first wild card, PNA. So there's three different oscillations that we're going to be talking about in this video. We have the PNA, which is the Pacific North American Teleconnection. We have North Atlantic Oscillation, or NAO, and we have Arctic Oscillation, which is AO. All of these are essentially teleconnections that kind of connect different, basically, they connect different weather or different blocking patterns or ridging patterns or troughing patterns in different areas, and how that links to weather in the United States. So generally, during a negative PNA phase, right, we have high pressure, and again, all these were these high-low pressure systems with jet streams position. Pay attention to this, because when I show some modeling later on in the video, you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, so these are kind of some things to look out for, so you can say, hey, wait a minute, maybe this weather is coming my way. High pressure in a negative PNA phase builds somewhere around the Gulf of Alaska, maybe a little bit further south. But generally, when that happens, right, the jet stream moves around the high because, of course, clockwise flow, and we see troughing into the western U.S., so maybe the Northwest is generally cooler. Again, generally speaking, during a negative PNA phase. Right? And because there's troughing over the west, what goes down must come up, and the jet stream will essentially ridge over the east and even the south, allowing for some warmer times. All right? So that is what happens during a negative PNA phase. What about a positive PNA phase? All right? Positive PNA phase, we usually have low pressure building somewhere around the Gulf of Alaska, maybe, again, a little bit further south. And again, counterclockwise flow, so the jet stream is going to move to the south of it, ridge over the west, and then trough over the east. Right? And essentially, you're going to hear me use this term a lot these terms a lot in this video. Ridging is essentially an upside down U in the trough, and then a normal U is like a or sorry, a ridge is the upside down U, and then troughing is kind of like the normal letter U, right? You kind of think of it as a U and an upside down U, in case you don't know what those terms mean. But over the west, it's generally warmer, and over the east, it is generally cooler, right? Again, these teleconnections, especially this one, kind of influences that polar jet stream, right? And that in turn influences what kind of weather we could have. So again, that's what a PNA means for the United States, Pacific North American Oscillation. Now, what is it at right now? Well, if we take a look here, if you look at the top one, you can kind of see we are in a positive phase right now, and we have been at least for a few days or so. All right, so we kind of shot up into a positive PNA here, and I think that's what's leading now because again, if you were to look at that map, it showed that the east is generally cooler, and we're now seeing some cold shocks coming into the east as we head into this positive PNA phase, which could last potentially another few days to a week, or maybe even another week or so before some of these ensembles here kind of forecast a trend downward eventually. And you can see it in the forecast. I believe these are the GEFS forecasts. You can see GEFS. They kind of forecast that direction downward over the next 7, 10, and 14 days. Now, sadly, a lot of these forecasts usually only go out a couple of weeks, but as we get closer to the winter, we might be able to use these to say, hey, maybe in the winter season, maybe we might notice the PNA is going positive or negative, and we can see what's going to happen from there. But these still do go out a couple of weeks, and they'll still be able to let us, observe where the high and low pressures are setting up, where we're seeing blocking, a blocking high pressure system, which I'll explain later as well. All these things that could lead, not just El Nino, but all these other factors here that could lead to a potentially epic winter season for some and not so great a winter season for others. If we take a look again at the bottom, the 14-day forecast kind of shows a trend towards the negative direction, but not quite getting there, at least in the forecasting. All right, next one, North Atlantic Oscillation. So this is what happens in a negative phase. That I actually had to put the text in there because this picture didn't say that this was a negative NAO, but it is. All right, because this is what the data shows. That just didn't have the text on there, so I went ahead and put on there for you guys. You can see during a negative North Atlantic Oscillation, and again, the Climate Prediction Center, you can go look at this, of course. But generally speaking, there is a high pressure that sets up over Greenland, somewhere near to the south of Greenland. And essentially what this high is going to do is essentially it's going to cause, again, the jet stream is going to go around it. Right? And because we have such a steep incline, that jet stream over the eastern, off the east coast, that means it has to come back down over the east coast. All right, and we also do have high pressure in the Gulf of Alaska somewhere. What does that remind you of? Positive PNA. All right, so they do kind of lead to the same thing. Positive PNA and a negative NAO both lead to this pattern of cold, chilly air over even the north central and parts of the east. So again, this could potentially influence my next winter forecast. But what it also does is it sets up a lot of cold air over portions of Europe as well. So you guys could even get some cold plunges of air. All right, so again, yeah, Arctic air definitely coming in over the eastern U.S. and Europe, and it also comes down to the jet streams, right? Because what you're going to see in some of these is that the jet stream in this one, it's kind of weaker, right? It's allowed to get, think of it, when it's weaker, it kind of gets wavy, it kind of fluctuates up and down, and that's what's going to be happening here in both a positive PNA and a negative NAO. Well, what about a positive NAO? What can happen then? Well, what happens then is we have this Bermuda high pressure system almost situated not too far away from Bermuda, right? Kind of sounds familiar for hurricane season. We have a Bermuda high setting up here that usually pushes tropical systems this way, and that's going to kind of keep the jet stream this way, right? Because it's not going to allow it to plunge, but it's essentially going to keep the jet stream. The jet stream is going to be stronger. It's going to kind of be held to the north a little bit, restricted, so that cold air is kind of just contained up in Greenland and up in the Arctic, and not really getting down, all right, into the United States. Now notice there is a high pressure here, yes, but it is a lot further south, and the jet stream is, again, this high pressure is instead working with this high pressure and this high pressure. So just because there's a high pressure here off the west coast doesn't mean, oh wait, that looked the same as the other one. No, because there's other high pressures. You can see one over the tropical Atlantic that can set up, and all around to the south of the jet stream to kind of think of it as like table legs, right? It kind of holds up the table, right? It holds it upright, Well, that's what it's doing with the jet stream. It's holding the jet stream up and it's keeping it flat, and it pretty much just stays restricted to the north. I thought that was a decent analogy, a decent way to think about it. If we take a look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, let's take a look at some of the observations and forecasts. All right, so taking a look here, you can see we are in a negative North Atlantic Oscillation right now, which is, again, about the same as a positive PNA. They both spell the same things for the west and parts of the central and eastern U.S. All right, so we are in a negative phase right now, and we have been for a while, at least since mid-September. We've been kind of in this negative phase here. And you can see we kind of enter like these periods, right? So we had a couple weeks here where we had a positive North Atlantic Oscillation during September. A couple weeks before that, we were negative again. We had a kind of a longer stretch, but in general, there's no like it doesn't go up and down rapidly, generally speaking, right? Like it's not like, oh, we're positive one day, negative the next, and then up and down. No. It's usually when it gets down to a certain point, it might be there for a week or two, but still fluctuate and then come back up. Right? There's like these phases, right? Everything kind of happens in phases. So eventually, we've been in for a long stretch here in the negative NAO, so eventually this will shoot up. We might enter a period of a positive NAO once again, kind of correlating with the negative PNA. So we could see a pattern reversal potentially coming soon. Again, everything's connected in weather. But you can see, again, that negative, it initially appears as heading negative, but then it could, again, turn positive by say, the end of the month, right? This is the 15th of October. This is the 30th or the 31st on the right edge of your screen. So again, potentially turning upwards in the next 2 weeks, and it could lead to a pattern reversal. All right, the last of the three oscillations we're talking about today is the Arctic oscillation, which is essentially similar to the North Atlantic oscillation in several ways. One is that negative Arctic oscillation usually means the same as a negative North Atlantic oscillation, and then same thing vice versa with the positives, right? And negative, we'll go on the right side of your screen. We look at a negative Arctic oscillation. The arrows are smaller. The jet stream is weaker. It's going to allow to spill in periods of cold air, right, over the East Coast. And potentially that could lead to some snow. Obviously, if it combines with for example, a subtropical jet to bring in some moisture on that cold air, right, helps to bring in that snow. However, in a positive Arctic oscillation, the arrows are stronger, the jet stream is stronger as opposed to weaker, right? It's stronger, it's held up more as opposed to weaker and it kind of fluctuating. So that's going to lead to, say, more of a warm pattern across the east, right? And at the very least, if not warm, at least like not getting very cold, right? Kind of like mild, if you will. Right? And of course, see sunnier conditions, say across northern Europe, and some colder air getting into Europe, just like with the negative North Atlantic oscillation, as opposed to warm and wet conditions when it's positive. So again, these are pretty much opposite of each other here. Weaker jet streams as opposed to stronger jet streams, right? You want that, if you're living in the United States especially, you want that chance at cold and snow. You want those weaker jet streams so they have a chance to dig down and provide that colder air. All right, if we look at the Arctic Oscillation Index, if we look at the observations, again, just like the NAO, it appears it could go a little bit more negative over the next few days, but then over the next couple of weeks, it could potentially take a spike back to the north. And you can see in the GEFS forecast, it's kind of forecasting there the same thing. Again, initial drop and then maybe spiking up potentially a little bit upward over the next couple of weeks. All right, so let's look at some modeling as we kind of head towards the tail end of this video here. I wanted to show you the CFS model. This is going from, I believe that is today's date, October 9th, going from October 9th through October 16th. So between now and next Monday. And you can see what is happening here, right? We have higher pressure, right? Higher geopotential heights. We have that blocking high, essentially, in Greenland. We do have low pressure here, interestingly enough, in south of the Gulf of Alaska. But we do have a big low pressure system that is moving through the East Coast. So it's an interesting setup that we're going to need to watch because these things can happen, right? Especially over the winter. If we look at this next graphic here, kind of highlights the more stereotypical, right? We have kind of lower geopotential heights here, leads to ridging. Then we have troughing here with this low pressure system kind of on the tail end of that. So this is all from that big storm system that's going to be moving through. But this is the 16th to the 23rd. This is what they expect could be happening during this time. So definitely an interesting forecast. And if it holds up this way, this could be a big game changer for the central and even East Coast this winter, and potentially even for the West Coast. Because again, these low pressure systems, they got to come in somewhere, right? They can't just stay there forever. So they will have to come into some capacity. All right, just to finish off the video here, just like a little review of the first winter 2023 to 2024 forecast. Again, the second one should be released in about a week or two or so. Of course, I don't want to release one like every few days because I'd be releasing the same video over and over again, and even I wouldn't want that. So, of course, we're going to wait until more information is provided so we can give an actual updated forecast with, useful information. But let's take a look again. Slightly less mountain snow over parts of the Intermountain Rockies. We have warm and dry for the northwest. Storm wave slightly cooler for the parts of the southwest. Right? Wet and cool conditions as usual for the south and even the southeast. Winter battle zone across pretty much not the dead middle of the country, but kind of in that south central United States, right? Like Oklahoma, Tennessee, Kentucky, all areas in that wintry mix. We have cold shots, of course, that will be making their way down from Canada at times. Same thing up here in the yellow, but again, it still could end up, we might get cold blasts, but they might not be as brutal as they normally are. So again, this could all certainly change, especially with, of course, new updates that we're getting by the day. But slightly warmer and drier seems to be the thinking still right now. Of course, lake effect snow always a priority, always a threat here for UP Michigan, Western Michigan, even like Cleveland, Ohio, up through Buffalo. Lake effect snow is still a possibility. And of course, those coastal storms and those nor'easters over the East Coast, which is one of the things that we're definitely going to have to watch out for because these oscillations, right, especially like the PNA, the NAO, and the AO, all can lead to a cold plunge of air during a time when in El Ninos we have that strong subtropical jet, right? And that's why when these combine or get very close to each other, they rotate and they can form kind of like this low pressure system that could then move up the coast and produce heavy rain, heavy snow, depending on where you are and where the storm tracks. So all of these wild cards are going to throw a monkey wrench into this winter, but this still seems to be the other thinking for right now. So we'll definitely have to wait and see how this winter goes. But of course, there will certainly be more updates down the line. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, stay tuned for my second winter update. I hope this little kind of in between, this was kind of like in between my first and second winter update. I surely hoped this was an interesting video. So again, those oscillations, in addition to the El Nino and everything else, are certainly all things to watch that could be factors and playing cards into what this winter could look like. So thank you guys for watching. I am The Weather Dude signing off till next time, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.